Hey guys, welcome back to Super Switch U. Uh, Today I want to try something different from the norm, and that is to not talk about the Switch 2. I know, crazy, right? Because that's all we ever talk about on this channel, except when we talk about Switch 1. Um, but it's not going to be either. Um, to the contrary, I would actually like to do a top 10 for a console that is very near and dear to my heart. If we keep it right about here-ish. And that, trying to rearrange this so I can see it, would be the N64. Um, I think I've said at least once on a previous video about my history with gaming and stuff, and how me and my brother were always kind of behind on systems, or like we'd get it at the end of a system's lifetime, and so then like I don't know. It's some of the old consoles we had. It seemed like we were stuck on them for a long time. But maybe that's just the when you're younger, your perspective of time is a lot longer than when you're older. I don't know. That's all philosophical things. That's not what we're here to talk about, though. Um, but the N64, originally released in 1996. I was 4 years old at the time that it released. And actually, I'd like to see that release date because I believe it was September of 96, which really puts it close to my birthday, too. And I believe it was something like that. Let's see. There we go. Wikipedia is probably fine for the basic generic facts, right? Yep, so September 29th, 1996 is when we got it here in North America. Japan, it was June of 96. Europe and the rest of the world got it in 97. And there wasn't like a massive library overall for this system. Part of that being that the cartridges that the games were released on were quite a bit more expensive than like the discs that the PlayStation had, or the discs that the Sega Saturn had, or the discs that the Panasonic 3DO had. And yeah, weird choice to go with cartridge versus disc. But I was a kid and I didn't actually care. Probably would have messed up a lot more games if they had been on a CD. Kind of like what happened with our PlayStation. I think some of those games got pretty scratched up. Uh, no fault to me. It couldn't possibly have been me doing it. I think it was Matt that did that. But N64 went with the cartridges, so they were expensive. These companies didn't fully support it, and when they did, it was expensive to get the games. I've seen recently some old sales ads saying things like $70 and $80 games back in the '90s. That would have been ridiculous. Uh, if I remembered game prices back then, but I didn't. I was a kid, so it was more like I want that one, and then maybe at Christmas time, 5 years later, I might get it. Because again, we were poor, but we did have a decent size little collection by the end, and there's a lot of nostalgia for those games. And alongside that, when we lived in Meeker, so all the way up until I was in fifth grade, most of that time there was a video store down the road, pretty much within walking distance. Um, and so we were able to rent a lot of N64 games from there. And then moving to Prague, there was a video store about 3 blocks from the house that was technically still walking distance, and they had for a while an N64 library, even that far into the 2000s. Um, so we got some experience with N64, and then growing up and into the teenage years and stuff. Me and my brother collected video games, so we would go to Game Exchange, vintage stock, and stuff like that, and pawn shops, and we would just buy what was at that time retro systems, because you're talking late 2000s into the teens. So I feel like I've played a decent chunk of the library that is available for the N64, so I can give a pretty good uh, idea on my opinions of the games and then my top 10. Sorry, I got a scratchy throat today. Not really sure why. But anyway, I don't know. That's some of my thoughts and facts and things on N64. But at one point in my life, I would have said it was probably one of my favorites. Looking back, I don't know if it would be in like the top three, maybe not even top five if you look at like every system ever made, including handhelds. I don't know. I mean, N64, it was unique. It had the unique controller with the three little prong things, and so you could either hold it by the sides, and you'd have the directional pad, or you could grab it by the weird little middle dongle and have the thumbstick. Um, and it had good games, but that's pretty much all you can say about it. So if you're talking from a perspective of a system, it didn't do a whole lot besides just graphically upgrade from the Super Nintendo and try to compete with things like PlayStation and Sega Saturn in the early days of 3D gaming and just higher power than what was there. Um, so yeah, that's in 64, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what else to say on that specific topic. But we'll say some decisions in this list might be surprising. Some were very, all of them were very difficult to make. Because even just looking through what was there, I kind of grabbed and pulled into a smaller list, and that smaller list was about 15, 16 games. I still had to slice it off to just get to top 10, and that's a hard decision to make, especially when you start getting to the top five. Um, Man, I don't know. I don't know. It was tough. It was just really tough. Not a lot of third party. I am gonna go ahead and say that. Um, and part of the reason on that, when you had third party on this particular generation of consoles, it released basically to every system. There wasn't a ton of N64 third party exclusives like there was with the original PlayStation. So when it comes to those versions of the games, especially when you wanted to save your game, it seemed like it was better to go with the PlayStation because Sega Saturn, I believe, was internal storage that was powered by a watch battery. And N64, if the cartridge didn't save, and not every game saved to the cartridge, it didn't have the internal saving storage there, you had to get a memory card that went to the back of the controller. And even in my adult, way more careful years, those memory cards were not very reliable. It seemed like they would corrupt data quite a bit, and they would they would fail. They would come in disconnected and stuff like that. So it was better, I feel like, with the PlayStation memory cards, stuff like Tony Hawk, Rampage, not Total Destruction, World Tour, some of the wrestling games and stuff. Some of those things were actually better for PlayStation. So they did not make my top 10 for N64, not so much that they may or may not make my top 10 if I go and do a PlayStation list. And I liked the original PlayStation. We will eventually get to that at some point. So it's not all going to be Nintendo. I swear. We will cover things like PlayStation and Xbox and Sega and Atari and maybe Atari. I don't know. I don't got a lot of thoughts on Atari. I don't know. I was feeling nostalgic, and I was like, you know what, top 10 would be a good idea. So, without wasting any more time, because we're almost 10 minutes into this video, let's start this thing. So number 10 is, I feel like, the only third-party game that made this list, and it was a wrestling game. It was. WWF No Mercy. Of the wrestling games that me and my brother played as kids, and we watched wrestling all the time. Our dad would get a lot of the pay-per-view events like WrestleMania and all the other ones I can't remember at this time because my dad brain is fried. And like our cousin would come over, and we would watch this stuff, even though we could never actually afford to go to see wrestling live until uh, 2 years ago, actually, back in 2023, for my dad's birthday. I got 4 tickets to Monday Night Raw, which was really cool. It was in Oklahoma City, and it fell on my dad's birthday, so it was a little more special. So me and my brother's stepson Jesse, my dad, we all went and watched it, and I made a sign and held up, and it was really cool. Even though you couldn't see us on TV with the broadcast, it was still fun. So yeah, I don't know if I actually said the name on number 10. So number 10, No Mercy. Sorry, we'll try to stay focused. I'm getting nostalgic. But No Mercy, I felt like was probably one of the best wrestling games, and the one we played more than any other. Like, we played the Super Nintendo ones, and we had not Attitude. No, yeah, we did. We had Attitude, and we had Warzone on the original PlayStation. No Mercy is the one we had on the N64, and I do feel like it got played more. It had a lot better roster from the Attitude era, so a lot of my favorites like Kane and Scotty 2 Hottie, just all of Too Cool was in it. D-Generation X, all the members were there. You could do ladder matches, cage matches. There were areas backstage that you could fight in. You could create your own characters, which that happened in a lot of wrestling games, but I feel like the character customization was so much better in No Mercy than it was in any other wrestling game. And I liked creating characters. I did. My brother hates it, but I love doing it. So having the better customization, I liked. So just all of that, and how much I know that we played it over and over and over again, even if it wasn't story mode every time. It's just matches. It kind of feels like it deserves that number 10 slot. Not that, all the other Nintendo games that don't make this list didn't deserve the number 10 slot, but I don't know. I'm trying not to fully focus on nostalgia. I'm trying to objectively look at this from my perspective then and my perspective now, and then kind of meld that together and see how I still feel about stuff. So anyway, 10, No Mercy. Number 9 on the list, Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is not one that I actually played on the original N64. I think even to this day I did not play the original N64 version. I went through it for the first time on Xbox One, playing through on Rare Replay. Yeah. But I liked that kind of game where it was the 3D platformer and it was like Rare's unique style of stuff. Because they did at least 3 of these that all felt really similar, and so 2 of them have made the list. The third one just barely fell out of it. And it was the one I feel like is the most generic. But I won't say that because it'll ruin the rest of the list. But Conker did all the fun stuff of those type of games while adding adult humor and jokes and all kinds of stuff. And so it was weird, it was inappropriate, but it's something that I enjoy more now. But I think, well, I don't know. I mean, I still probably would have enjoyed some of it quite a bit as a kid. Gotten many a laughs out of the Great Mighty Pooh and some of the other weird stuff that happens in that game. But outside of the humor and the adult elements of it, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot else that was unique. So it feels a little lower to the top 10. Number 8, and I swear I've played this and beat it because I did right before Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. I just cannot remember much about the game itself. I just know that I did enjoy it and that it felt like this is the spot for it. Paper Mario. Number 8 would be Paper Mario, the original. Uh, because it was a good RPG, and it introduced us into the series of Paper Mario, kind of spinning it off from being just Super Mario RPG from the Super Nintendo. It kind of took its own direction and flavor, and uh, though not as memorable as the Thousand Year Door, the characters were not quite as memorable because I do not remember any of the names. I barely remember the faces. I could look at the cover and be like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember you got a Goomba and a Boo and a Paratroopa," but like they felt more unique in Thousand Year Door than this. So I don't know. It still needed to be in the top 10 because Paper Mario is really good, and most of those games feel like they should be top 10 or just under. And that's where this is at. Number 7, and this was hard to put this far down the list, but then looking at the next 6 games, I just could not realistically convince myself that it deserved to be above the other games in the list, but it's still high enough to be with those other games. Number 7 is Star Fox 64. And I talk so much about Star Fox on this channel, it's unreal. Because I do love Star Fox. I love the games, I love the series, I love the characters. The stories are really good. And just honest little tidbit here. In 3rd grade, I started drawing comics. Just little one-pager, like few-page comics. Nothing super great. But it kind of started as a contest that one of my friends challenged me to, because I like to draw and they like to draw, and so a few of our other friends wanted to know like who was the better artist, and so one friend came up with the idea that we should do a comic book contest. She thought that was a good idea, so we had a deadline and we needed to come up with a comic, and you may be wondering what all this has to do with Star Fox, and I'm getting to that. So my comic was kind of very heavily inspired by Star Fox 64. It was something I called Captain Hop, as where Star Fox, it's a fox that's the leader of a space troop. Mine, it was a frog character, not quite as useless as Slippy, but very comedic, as it was like a parody on Star Wars, Star Fox, Star Trek, and I think it played more towards the line of Star Trek, being very episodic and not main story focused. But I ended up drawing those comics for years, and I still have those thoughts, the ideas in my head, and came really close to making it a children's picture book series, because I started doing those recently within the last 2 years. And I still might. It may end up turning it into a children's book series. I just haven't figured out what audience I want to focus that on. But, I mean, that's how much I love Star Fox. And this Star Fox 64 was another one that we played over and over again. And even, like, it released on the 3DS as Star Fox 64 3D. Bought it. First day, went and got that. And I played the crap out of it on the 3DS. And it had very minor, like... what's the words I'm looking for here? Quality of life improvements, but it just kind of added to that experience. But I still loved the game so much. I would buy it again if they just remade it and it was basically the same thing but better graphics or whatever for the Switch. They don't even have to do that. If they just put Star Fox 64 as it was, just clean up or whatever, and throw it on Switch or Switch 2, I would throw any amount of money at that. Maybe because I'm a fool. I don't know, but I love that game. So it feels like a crime to put it as number 7, but it is where it fell. Number 6. A Mario Party was bound to make this list. And there were 3 on the N64, but not all 3 of those are on this list. I barely played 1 or 2. ours of choice, and what is number 6 is Mario Party 3. For a long time, that was our Mario Party. There was no version before that we had, and no other consoles that we had for a long time that actually had a Mario Party on it. So that was what we played over and over and over again. Anytime we wanted to play Mario Party, it was three. It was three every single time. It was not like the first one where they didn't include Waluigi. He was there, so that was my character. That was my guy every time. It was great, and we'd play with friends. We'd play with cousins. Yeah, so this also feels weird to put it so low in the list. But again, when you see the rest of it, some of that's going to make sense. And everybody has their different opinions on stuff, but some of these are like universally this should be in the top 5, which is where we are now at. And this may seem like it's a little bit low, and I'll try to explain it the best I can. The line of thinking that I had for putting this at number 5. Super Smash Bros. yeah, that should or shouldn't have been at number 5, but when you're thinking about the original Super Smash Bros. From the N64, it did not have the large character rosters that all these other games had. It didn't have all the battle stages and modes and stuff that all these other games had. It was a roster of, I believe, 8 characters with 4 unlockable for a total of 12. And when it's such a limited roster, if you... any mode that you pick is going to start to feel the same after a while. Now, as a kid, I could do that all day, every day, and it was always just as magical and wonderful as it was the first time. As a teenager and adult, I don't feel like I even need to go back and get an N64 because so much of that content is still available in, the future releases. And then Smash Bros. Ultimate on Switch 1, I think has either all of or almost all of the stages from that game and every single character. And without a whole lot to its own unique identity, all the modes are basically present too. Target, attack, and the... I know there was another one, like the escape minigame and stuff. Like, there's some version to that for all of it. And the single player, like arcade style mode, and the multiplayer modes, it was so limited. Most of that just feels like it's in every Smash Bros. Game. So you got to take a lot of that into consideration if you're trying to go back and look at it now, as we're in the day, in its generation, it was the only one. So it shined out better than the rest. But as soon as Melee came out on the GameCube, I feel like objectively Smash Bros. Was irrelevant on N64. Not that we had Melee at the beginning, but most of my experience with the GameCube before getting it, like years before getting it, was Melee at friends' houses, at church events and stuff like that. It was always the go-to game for GameCube. So, yeah, as great as Smash Bros. Is, the first one is not in my top 3. It's number 5. Number 4, also a tough one to put there, Mario Kart 64. And again, for a long time, even after Double Dash released and stuff like that, this was our go-to Mario Kart. We had Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. It just did not have the same magic as Mario Kart 64. It wasn't the same type of character roster. The stages were all way more unique than Super's, with its like 3 different variations to every stage and 4 different Bowser castles and stuff. 64, every single stage felt like it had some love and creativity just dumped into it. And though it was not the greatest roster on 64, it was a good solid base. Not any of the random enemies. It was just your mainline characters and enemies. I believe Bowser was really the only enemy there, but I'm now struggling to remember the roster specifically. I know it was just the basics. That's what it was. Um, so with that, let's move on to number 3. We're on top 3. Um, this one was kind of a surprise with how well I loved the game, even growing up, because I remember exactly how we got this. And I say we, it was a birthday present for my brother. Um, I was actually with my parents when we were shopping for his birthdays that day, and we went to Blockbuster in Shawnee, so like right in front of the mall. Um, and we got him 2 N64 games for his birthday that year. They were used ones that were being sold from Best Buy, or not Best Buy, but Blockbuster. Two B's. It's almost the same thing. Um, it was Banjo Tooie and Castlevania, not Castlevania 64, but the one with the werewolf on it. I can't think of the name now. But Banjo Tooie is the one on number 3. If I didn't say that, Banjo Tooie is number 3. And that is magic in a box, or specifically a cartridge, like magic in a cartridge. Because when it comes to the open 3D platformer type adventure games like that, and not throwing Mario 64 into it, because that you like still have to jump into the paintings and you go into different worlds, but like I mean where everything is kind of interconnected. um it did it probably the best between that and Rare's other 2 games, Conquer and Donkey Kong 64, which, if you've guessed now, Donkey Kong 64 did not make my list. I did not play that until so much further after that it felt like just the most generic version of the first 2, Conquerors and Banjo Tooie, because like yeah, you could switch between different characters for abilities, but it didn't seem like there was any of the transformations, none of the good comedic elements that Banjo Tooie and Conquer had, and I don't know, even the worlds didn't feel quite as unique as some of these. But Banjo Tooie's takes everything a step above. Its worlds are completely memorable, and I played through this thing so much. But you had the transformation abilities, which I've already mentioned that. I know. I'm going to repeat myself a lot because I'm trying to focus here. But all the characters were great. You had the missions to get Jiggies for Mumbo Jumbo, and Wumba would do the transformations and stuff, and just all of the gameplay. There was tons of hours worth of collecting and finding stuff and discovering new things, and the massive, or probably not massive now, but at the time it seemed like it was a massive list of abilities that you learned both with Banjo and Kazooie together, or each one individually had their own list of moves, and you'd have to go back and do certain stages to get Jiggies that you missed before because you couldn't get them. There were different shortcuts that went back and forth between the stages. It was great. It just this whole interconnected world, and it felt like just pure joy as a kid, and as an adult it brings out the inner child, and I can just have as much fun today as I did back in the 90s, early 2000s when we were playing that. So number 3. Number 2 and number 1 were so hard to place, but I can only try to make you see where I'm coming from with this, because I'm going to get a lot of flack for not putting number 2 as number 1. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is number 2. And no, Majora's Mask is not on this list. I did not care for it nearly as much as I did anything on this, and even if I did like a top 15, I don't think it'd be there either. I didn't care for it. Majora's Mask's time mechanics and some of the going back and forth, and it just felt so repetitive. But Ocarina of Time, even though you did go to certain stages again, both as an adult and as a kid, and you'd switch between time, it never felt like a chore to go back and forth to do these things. It just felt like you were always still straight on a linear path all the way until you got to the end. And being a big open action adventure game with all of its fantastic dungeons and characters and secrets, and I could sink hundreds of hours into that game and still not be bored in any one like sitting, and then come back to it years later and do the exact same thing. Because it's another one of those. It got re-released on the 3DS. I picked it up first day. I played through it again multiple times on the 3DS because I loved it that much. Like, it was just, it's a great game. I don't feel like it's quite as good as number one though. And if you want to try to take a guess, this would be your time, because it's probably pretty obvious at this point. Super Mario 64. That is number one, because I think I've played that game specifically more than any other game I have ever played in my entire life. And I could still do it some more. And it doesn't matter if it's the N64 version, the DS version that had the extra characters, if it's the one that was in 3D All-Stars, if it was a virtual console copy of the game. I could play that thing all day, every day, and still not be bored with the game, I feel like. I've not tested that theory. It's just how much I love the game. I feel like if ever there was only one game I could play from here to the end of my days, that would probably be it. That and Star Fox. Even though it's number 7, don't listen to me. I maybe I need to bump that up, and maybe that needs to come to 2. But I mean, it was not quite as open as some of the things like Banjo-Tooie and that, but the sheer number of stars you collect is massive, and the stages do not feel repetitive. Going back and getting all 6 or 7 stars, or however many there was, even getting the star for collecting the coins and stuff like that. There was never an underabundance of time that was played in that game, and I could still, to this day, and that's part of why I got Mario 3D All Stars when it came out on the Switch. I knew that I wanted to continue playing this game into my retirement age, and when one day I was going to have kids, I'd want to play it with them. And now I don't regret that decision, because I do have kids. I've got 2 of probably the best boys in the world, and one day when they are old enough to play games with Daddy, that will probably be one of the first ones I introduce them to, is Mario 64. Because it's going to be magical. It's going to be great, and there's no way that it could possibly have a downside, right? Only good can happen. So, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, that's my top 10. Just to kind of review it in case I rambled a little too much. Let me get a drink because it's still scratchy. That was number 10 was WWF No Mercy. 9 was Conker's Bad Fur Day. 8 was Paper Mario. 7 Star Fox 64. 6 was Mario Party 3. 5 was Super Smash Bros. 4 Mario Kart 64. 3 was Banjo-Tooie. 2 The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And number 1 for my list of best N64 games was Super Mario 64, which is probably the top or at the top of most people's lists. That should really tell you something, right? It deserves to be on the top. So, with that, let me know what you guys think down below. If you agree with my list, if your list is different, feel free to share it, and we could definitely discuss it. I would love to know what you guys play and what you think are the best, and we could just be nostalgic and reminisce about old N64 games, because I mean, why not? Because we a bunch of old farts talking about 30-year-old console, which I would love to say I was joking, but next year N64 turns 30. It was bad when I turned 30, but now one of my most nostalgic consoles is catching up to me in age, and ugh, it does not feel good to say, because again, when I was a kid, 30 years before my stuff, I don't know if there even was a console specifically that came out in 1966. You would be talking about old arcade machines, or maybe Pong, I think. Um, I don't know. We could take a peek. I mean, I usually use the end of these videos just kind of ramble and talk about whatever. So like, if you like the video, like it, and if you want to subscribe, I would definitely appreciate that for sure. And then we'll just kind of ramble for a minute, and then that'll be the end. But game. So I feel like there was something. It was probably a stupid something, but all right. So first generation consoles. Ooh, we're going old. Let's see. No, no, we're not. I was right. There was no, without the stuttering. There was no 30 years ago when I was a kid playing games. The closest thing that you could get to that in age would have been the I just want to make sure like there wasn't something before Generation 1, but I don't think there was. No. So the closest you could get would have been the Magnavox Odyssey, which was 24 at that point, because it released in North America September of 1972. So, yeah, the fact that we can think back to some of this stuff and there are 30-year-old consoles now is weird to me, because I didn't have that as a kid. Actually, I guess with that same line of thinking, until 19 or 19, it would have been 2002. 30 years ago would have been the Magnavox Odyssey. That was the first system to turn 30 in that year specifically. Uh, so yeah, like it's insane that now the 30-year-old console is the N64, and I'm old. Old as the hills and twice as crusty, as my wife would say. Not about me specifically. She just says that when things are like super old. But yeah, so let me know in the comments what you guys think, if what your list is. If there's any specific consoles that you would like to see me do a top 10 for, and know what my opinion is on different systems. I will probably end up doing them anyway, but if there's suggestions for some, I will do those before I get to the other ones. It just may take me a minute to really like collectively get my thoughts together and be like, okay, so this is without a doubt, this is my top 10. Because this is hard, and the bigger the library, the harder it is. So stuff like the Wii is going to be really difficult, because I did Switch 1 right before Switch 2 came out, and that was nearly impossible to really put together, but I got it. Like it was rough, but I got a list put together. And I think I incorporated just everything in general. But if you were to even go just specific, like exclusively Switch 1, I don't know. I don't know how that would go. But I'll do different systems, and if you guys have suggestions for those, if you guys just want to talk about specific games and different things, Could definitely do videos specifically dedicated to it, or we could just talk about it in the comments section. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe, help us get to 1,000 subscribers, hopefully before the end of the year. But if not, we'll set new goalposts and we'll try it again. And then bell notification button so you can be alerted to upcoming videos, because this is not consistent by any means. I just kind of throw these out there wherever I can. And yeah, thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.